Welcome to L&M channel. This time we will present a Korean drama entitled Lightshop, which is a mystery and horror genre. Let's start with the first and second episodes. A man named Hyun-min always goes home from work at midnight by bus. Several times he saw a woman in white with a suitcase beside her, sitting at the bus stop. Although curious, because the woman always sat in the same place, he ignored her because he didn't know the woman. Then on the third night, he greeted the woman and asked what the woman doing. And the woman replied that she was waiting. Hyun-min wondered what she was waiting for, because she didn't take the last bus. And the woman said that her cell phone was lost. Then when Hyun-min wanted to lend her cell phone, he was shocked to see his cell phone cracked because it's previously fine. When Hyun-min asked what her number, the woman didn't say her number. She asked instead, didn't Hyun-min recognize her? But Hyun-min felt like he had never met her before, so he left the woman. And the next day, when he went home, Hyun-min got off the bus and immediately held an umbrella for the woman, because it was raining heavily. The woman asked again if Hyun-min recognized her. Hyun-min answered of course, because they met yesterday and 2 days ago. Then Hyun-min told the woman to hold his umbrella, because his house was closed so he could run home. The woman felt that since they had met and Hyun-min recognized her, she asked if they would meet again tomorrow, because it was almost midnight and the day would change. And the woman also said that she didn't have much time, she was cold and Hyun-min's house was also closed. Then Hyun-min invited the woman to stop by his house and they went together. Until in front of his apartment, Hyun-min still felt a little strange and he offered to call a taxi. But the woman asked him to open the door of his house and they entered the elevator together. Hyun-min was a little nervous and then invited the woman to come in. When he wanted to turn on the lights, the woman forbade him and left the place dark. Then the woman went in and the door closed by itself. Meanwhile, in a hospital, a senior nurse, Mrs. Hyo, has a problem with her eyes. Her vision is blurry and she often sees things floating. Her coworkers think it's because they often work overtime and work too hard. Then they invite her to eat instant noodles, but Mrs. Hyo is worried that the smell will spread. Then Yanji tells them to eat in the locker room, because she has finished eating cherry tomatoes. As the person in charge of the ICU, Yanji must stay there to guard the monitor and they go to eat. Suddenly there is a man walking back and forth in the ICU room, even though only authorized personnel are allowed to enter and ICU visits are also not allowed at night. Then the man asks Yanji, where is the morgue? Suddenly the monitor screen sounds and Yanji calls her friends. They immediately check the patient's condition and wonder how the oxygen tube came off. Mrs. Hyo tells the nurses to always be alert and Yanji suddenly remembers the man. But the man is no longer in the room. There is a man shivering with cold and there is also the sound of a dog barking that bothers him. He shouts for the dog's owner to stop the dog barking. Wang works as the manager of the shop. His behavior and appearance as a shopkeeper are quite mysterious because he wears a coat and sunglasses. Suddenly the man who was previously in the ICU entered Wang's shop. The man seemed confused seeing the many lights there, and Wang asked what he could help with, but the man didn't answer and instead went out of the shop. There was a man who was previously shivering with cold, who entered Wang's shop. He said he had a house, but even though he had turned on the heater, he was still cold. When he wanted to hold a lamp, suddenly the lamp and Wang's glasses seemed to freeze. Wang told the man not to touch his things. Then the man looked for a dog that passed in front of his shop, but Wang felt like he didn't see it and the man went to look for the dog. Hyunju is a high school student. When in class it suddenly rained heavily and one of her friends told a scary story. She heard that there was a student at their school who was unknown to anyone. No one knew that there was a student who had seen her. And there were 2 empty chairs in each class. They then went home from school on foot, while it was still raining heavily. When they arrived at an alley, the student told a story about the alley. She had heard that there was someone who often wandered there at night. And the alley was very dark, but Yanji was not afraid because at the end of the alley it was very bright. When her friends ran because of fear, Yanji dared to go through the alley because she had to buy a lamp ordered by her mother. She saw someone walking towards her and then she ran and entered Wang's shop. It turned out that Yanji was used to buying lamps at the shop and Wang also knew her. Wang gave an unwrapped candy for Yanji, even though Yanji was no longer a kid. Yanji was curious about Wang's age and why did Wang always wear glasses. Wang explained that the light in his shop was too bright and his eyesight had gotten worse while working there. And the shop was open at night until sunrise and Yanji was very grateful because it was so bright there and she could pass because of Wang's shop. The alley she passed was very dark and also scary. It was said that there were ghosts around there. And Yanji had just seen it even though it wasn't very clear. Wang was a bit surprised to find out that Yanji could see it and he asked Yanji to listen to him. Maybe Yanji saw something that was invisible to others. There are some people like that, and Yanji might be one of them, who saw a stranger. Wang saw it too. When running this shop alone, all Wang met were customers. So, she got used to observing customers closely. Most of them were ordinary people. But there were some who were a bit strange and they mixed in with other people. Observe them to find out there was something different about them and it was hard to notice them. So Yanji had to observe them to realize it. Yanji had to be careful with strangers. If she met them, she had to pretend not to see them, and if she had already seen, pretend not to notice something strange. Strangely, in the mirror of the table, looks Wang, who looks old and Yanji does not realize it. Then Wang gives a flashlight that can be turned on when turned for Yanji. She can use it in dark places and Yanji thanks Wang, who she calls uncle. Back to the woman in white, who entered Hyunmin's house. Because the woman's body is wet, Hyunmin takes a towel for her. While using the towel, Hyunmin sees the woman's hand that is strange. Hyunmin is very scared but still tries to stay calm. Then the woman opens her suitcase containing scissors and carving tools. She holds scissors and at that time Wang looks old while staring at the flashing lights. Yanji sees when the woman comes out of Hyunmin's house. When passing by, Yanji greets the woman and the woman stops. The suitcase she is carrying is dripping with fresh blood. Cen Hey, a writer looking for a quiet house to live in. She doesn't like apartments because her neighbors are too close and this house is suitable because it is in an alley and the houses around it are empty. There is a room that can't be opened and the seller argues that the room still needs repairs, so it can't be opened. That's why the house has a low deposit, but according to Cen Hey, even though it's cheap it shouldn't be like this. But there is no other place that is cheap and fits her budget, so Cen Hey accepts the house. She then arranges her house and cleans her house. She puts a mirror near the closed room and also closes the door with a curtain. A male student named Wang passes through the alley and he walks while singing so that he is not afraid. The more he walks the more afraid he feels and he runs while singing. Until Cen Hey hears it and disturbs her concentration. Wang sings loudly because he is very scared and he arrives in front of the light shop. Cen Hey falls asleep in front of her laptop and at that time there is a shadow behind her and the lights suddenly go out by themselves. Behind the door of her house it also looks like someone is walking away. It rains and makes the atmosphere become scary. The lights also go out, which makes Cen Hey upset because she can't read a book. And the alcoholic is delirious by himself. When in the ICU, he tells people who approach him to stay away from him, even though the only ones who approach him just a nurse. She was forced to be treated in the ICU because the hospital lacks inpatient space. Then the doctor meets the patient's family and says that they have tried their best and now it depends on the patient's determination. Because in the end, the patient's determination to live is the most important. But the patient's family feels frustrated and asks what the hospital has done for the patient. While drying her hair, Cen Hey feels something strange on the door of the room that can't be opened. At the same time, Ji-woong walks down the alley and he seems to see someone walking in front of him. From inside the house, Cen Hey hears Ji-woong singing again, and suddenly the lights go out again and she sees the door to the room slightly open. She is curious and peeks into the room and then opens the door. Yanji goes into the toilet and suddenly someone knocks on the toilet door. Then, there is a woman's voice asking Yanji. She's talked about the patient's determination to live like what the doctor said before. Yanji felt sorry and asked because they had tried their best. Then the woman asked, how does that determination work? How can a seriously ill person have determination, even though he is unconscious? Actually, Yanji always thought about it. She had also been in a coma during a major accident. And at that time the doctor also said the same thing to her mother. The patient's determination is the most important. Her mother was sad because she didn't understand what doctor meant and she thought the possibility was zero. However, Yanji came to, and she didn't know how she could regain consciousness. It was likely a prayer from her mother. She wanted to give Yanji determination, so Yanji thought maybe it wasn't just her determination. Her profession is now a nurse, but she doesn't know how people have determination when they are unconscious. Honestly, she doesn't know where the determination came from and they can only wait and try everything. Suddenly the door tried to be opened from the outside and the lights also went out and came back on and scared Yanji. The woman seemed frustrated because it seemed like they were at a dead end and asked Yanji to do something. Suddenly a scary person appeared from above the toilet door. Then a janitor called Yanji and she disappeared and the situation returned to normal. Cen Hey entered the room and saw a light that was on and then turned it off. She saw Ji-woong who likes to sing and bothers her. When she asks why Ji-woong always sings, Ji-woong is scared and leaves. When school is over, one of Hyunju's friends falls asleep. Her two friends let her and go home first, while Hyunju tries to wake her up. She wakes up for a moment and tells Hyunju to let her sleep. Then Hyunju lets her and leaves her sleeping alone in the classroom. Hyunju goes home through the dark alley again. She turns on the flashlight given by Wang. In the middle of the road, the flashlight goes out and she tries to turn it on again. Suddenly in front of her there is a woman in red shoes. The woman sees her and Hyunju offers to hold an umbrella for her. The woman asks who she is and where she is going. Then Hyunju answers that she is a student who wants to go to the light shop. The woman leaves and Hyunju chases her and holds an umbrella for her. They walk together and suddenly the woman's hair becomes long. Hyunju becomes scared. She remembers Wanyang's words. If you meet a stranger, to pretend not to see her. But the woman walks with strange and her body became very tall. Of course it made Hyunju very scared. She remembers Wanyang's words. Again, if you see it, pretend not to realize something strange. She told the woman to go home immediately, because her mother was waiting for her. Hyunju walked quickly and when she looked back, she saw a woman walking towards her and Hyunju ran, while screaming. Wanyang heard it and came out of the shop. Hyunju, who was scared, asked her uncle for help. Wanyang asked Hyunju to go home and then Wanyang took off his glasses. The woman stopped and turned around. Her body also shrank to normal size like a normal human. Hyunju's friend, who was sleeping, woke up and found herself alone in the classroom. When there was lightning, a foreign student was seen sitting on an empty bench. She said, "You saw it too?" "I saw it too." While in the middle of the road, Ji-woong met a woman carrying a suitcase. He then held an umbrella over the woman and the woman asked where he was going. Ji-woong replied that there was a lighting store nearby and if he got to that store, then he could go home. Then he asked the woman to go with him to the light store. As they walked together, the woman asked if Ji-woong was alone, and Ji-woong answered that he was alone. While Cen Hey was annoyed because the lights in the living room were always off, she took a flashlight and took a shower with the flashlight on. After taking a shower, she saw a lot of hair in the drain, and Cen Hey was shocked. When she came out of the bathroom, suddenly the bathroom door closed by itself and made Cen Hey shocked. At the same time, Ji-woon said to the woman that this alley was always dark, then the window lit up like now. When looking at the window, it turned out that there was a woman there, but there was also someone else behind her and they were together. Cen Hey felt that there was something strange when she lived in the house. The lights in the house went out because there was a creature that wanted to hide in the darkness. The creature was in the house with Cen Hey. And the woman carrying the suitcase was curious if they knew each other, then she wanted to enter the house. But Ji-woon held her hand and Ji-woon was shocked when he saw the woman's hand. The woman said that Ji-woon was not much different from her and at that time Ji-woon saw her feet, which were like broken. He tried to get out of the alley with difficulty walking. She screamed and asked for help, but no one came to help her. How many times she walked, she always went back past Cen Hey's house, and he cried because he was so frustrated. And Cen Hey also wanted to get out of the house, but she forgot her house password. She took a hammer and broke the glass door, but the door still wouldn't open. She screamed for help, and Cen Hey was very frustrated because she couldn't open her own door and no one came to help her. The woman carrying the suitcase entered the light shop and Wang asked what he could help her with. At first the woman ignored him and just looked at the lights, then the woman answered that she needed something. And at that time someone else entered the shop. It turned out that he was a man from the police.
경찰입니다.
1 month ago, there was a woman who lived alone. Suddenly someone knocked on her door. She slowly turned off the lights and the person tried to open the door. The woman seemed to know the person who wanted to come in because she was angry and didn't want to meet him. She wanted the person not to bother her anymore because she had contacted the police. When she opened the door of her house, there was no one and suddenly a creature came quickly and the woman fell from the window of her house. Then, at the bus station, a suspicious man entered a bus. He seemed to be hiding from someone. Suddenly a police detective entered the bus and asked all passengers to get off the bus for a moment, but the woman who's sitting in the front didn't get off. And the suspicious man didn't want to get off, then the detective approached him. The detective said someone died in a villa. The woman who lived alone died of shortness of breath. And there was a fire there. It was a case of arson and the detective suspected the man was the perpetrator. The man didn't answer. He was actually surprised to see a shabby woman who seemed to be a victim of the fire. Then the detective arrested the man.
뭐야?
In a house, there was an old man watching TV alone. Behind the window it seemed like someone was watching him, and that person knocked on the door. Detective Yang Sang-sik sat at his office desk. At that time, on his desk there was a photo of a student in Hyanju's class. He looked back at the woman's burning case, but the case had been reported closed. He was curious that there was a witness who was told to go home because he was freed from charges. It was a case of an elderly person's death. They called the man for questioning because someone saw him at the scene. But it turned out that the cause was an accident. According to the autopsy report, the cause of death was a stroke. When Detective Sang-sik went to the scene, they didn't put up a police line because it was just an accident. Detective Sang-sik is famous for his sharp observation because he always remembers the faces he has seen and always pays attention to small details. But the cases he handles are never really finished. Even though the arrest rate is high, the resolution rate is low. He came to the case of the death of an elderly person who lived alone. According to them, it was a sudden death, maybe due to acute myocardial infarction. His wife died and his children live abroad, so he lives alone. Sang-sik observes the elderly, and if the cause of death was illness, then there should be signs of great pain and agony. Why did he look so calm? When looking at his cell phone there was also something strange. He contacted his children and grandchildren before he died. Detective Sang-sik reviewed the elderly case report and they felt that an autopsy was not necessary based on the condition and medical records of the deceased. And the family also refused an autopsy. His family did not like the deceased's body being cut. The body had been given to his family, so the case was closed. Because it was still disturbing, Sang-sik checked several Chinese food restaurants that did delivery orders. Until the evening, he found a small restaurant and saw a motorbike used for delivery in a fairly dirty condition. He then went into the restaurant and ordered jjajangmyeon, and he looked around the restaurant and there was a place to put the delivery order. He remembered that the seller was someone who had been acquitted of charges at the police station before. Then Sang-sik asked how he made the delivery and the man replied that he did it. Even though there was no application installed, all customers were looking for ways to order food. Then Sang-sik concluded that his order was delivered without making an order, and this place was too far from the elderly's house. The man confirmed it because jjajangmyeon would become soft, but Sang-sik did not say that the food ordered was jjajangmyeon. From the beginning, Sang-sik felt that the elderly person's death was suspicious. His expression seemed unnatural for death due to illness. He thought it was age spots, but it turned out to be jjajangmyeon sauce. Sang-sik was sure that the man in front of him was the perpetrator, but the man felt belittled, besides that he did not understand what Sang-sik meant. Because he did not understand, Sang-sik felt that there was no other way but to watch him.
그러지.
A month later there was a woman running fast and behind her there was a motorbike that seemed to be chasing her. Then Sang-sik came and knocked down the motorcyclist. He hit the person's head on the asphalt and when his helmet was opened it turned out that he was the seller. Sang-sik felt that he would plan another murder and felt that he was a crazy killer. Then Sang-sik asked the woman if she was okay. The seller was surprised because Sang-sik could see the woman. Then the woman woke up and she was the victim of the apartment fire at that time. It was scary because the woman's eyes were bleeding and the seller felt that the detective had sharp eyes because the woman shouldn't have been there. Then the man tried to escape and Sang-sik tried to catch him again. When he fell, Sang-sik saw his strange eyes like a cat's eyes. Sang-sik entered the light shop and he went there to look for the suspect he was chasing. A man in his mid-30s, 180 tall, short hair. He passed by there, and only this place was open at this late night. Then Sang-sik saw a woman in white carrying a suitcase, dripping with blood. Sang-sik asked if the woman was hurt and she said no, it was her monthly cycle. She entered the shop just to wait for the rain to stop. Then Sang-sik took off his raincoat and gave it to the woman, but the woman was silent. Then he put it on. The woman left the light shop and Sang-sik and Wang were left in the shop. Sang-sik seemed interested in Wang's shop, but the shop was strange. Then Wang asked how Sang-sik got to this place. Sang-sik answered, because only this shop looks bright. But Wang asked him to answer, not because the shop is bright, but how did he get to this place?
말고 이곳에.
A man works as a doctor and is assisted by a nurse, who is in the morgue. While checking the body, the nurse screamed, because the body was still alive and making a sound. The doctor told her to calm down because the deceased could hear her. She was not a body, but the deceased, and that was the sound of gas coming out of the deceased's body. Then the doctor told the nurse to rest and respect the deceased. Then the nurse apologized to the deceased. They then took good care of the deceased. And when everything was finished, the doctor asked the nurse to contact her family. When they were alone,
난 죽은 건가?
Suddenly the deceased spoke to the doctor that she should not die like that. Then the doctor asked to let go of everything, leave them, and rest in peace. Many people feel guilty about themselves when they die. Some people take a long time to accept their death, but the deceased felt that they could not accept it because it was not the time. The doctor felt that it was because the deceased was not used to it. The deceased would go to a better place. The doctor asked to rest in peace and they would pick her up when the procedure was complete. When she was put in the corpse storage room, the deceased felt it was too dark there. But the doctor said that she would forget the place completely and feel comfortable. When the doctor closed the storage door, there was a sound of crying from inside the place. Yanji took the elevator to her workplace in the ICU room of a hospital. Behind her a man was also waiting to get on the elevator. The man was wearing wet clothes and was about to go up to the 8th floor, but Yanji thought visitors were prohibited from going up to the 8th floor at night. She explained that she worked there and the 8th floor only had an ICU room. The man asked if the patient was serious and Yanji couldn't be sure because their conditions were all critical. Now it depends on the patient's determination to leave. Hearing that, the man cried and the floor suddenly filled with water like a flood. Yanji was very scared because the man crying with a lot of tears. Yanji asked the man to stop and the water had reached the top and made Yanji difficult to breathe. No matter how many times Yanji begged to stop, the man still continued crying. And then the elevator reached the 8th floor and the door opened, the water and the man disappeared, and Yanji got out of the elevator. Wang asked Sang-sik again who he was looking for. Then Sang-sik explained that he was a man in his 30s who was around 180 years old and he also had eyes, strange like a cat. When he explained it, suddenly his own eyes looked strange and Wang saw it. The suspect was riding a scooter and the scooter seemed to be passing here, so Sang-sik just followed the voice and arrived here. But Wang didn't hear the sound of the scooter and Sang-sik intended to leave the shop. But because it was still raining, Wang told Sang-sik to wait inside the shop until the rain stopped. Maybe the person he was looking for would enter the shop too. The ICU room was quite busy because there were 2 more accident patients with worse conditions. They planned to move the alcoholic patient to the room if he got better because the ICU room was full. It turned out that the patient had been hospitalized many times because of alcohol addiction and he still couldn't stop drinking alcohol. The nurses were sure that if he was sent home, he would return to the hospital again with the same condition. Yanji asked the senior nurse to take care of the transfer of the alcoholic patient because she wanted to talk to him. Previously Yanji had been in a coma because she was hit by a drunk driver, so she wanted to talk about the impact so that the patient would stop drinking alcohol. In the middle of the road, Hyunju met a woman carrying a suitcase. They had met before and Hyunju could see her. She asked if Hyunju wanted to buy a light bulb. Hyunju often bought it because it was her mother's order. Then the woman told Hyunju to be careful and Hyunju left her. Yanji pushed wheelchair of the alcoholic patient and said that he was in a very dangerous phase. Alcohol addiction triggers liver failure which can lead to death. Before he lost consciousness and kept rambling, as if seeing something, as if talking to someone. Yanji suspected that he saw someone, because seriously ill patients often experience delirium. They can't think clearly and suffer from temporary amnesia. They can't recognize places and people and experience visual and auditory hallucinations. The ICU is like being on the verge of life and death. Many people come in and out, some are alive and some are dead. And Yanji is curious about who he saw. The figure he saw, Yanji also saw. Yanji had a serious car accident and ended up in the ICU. Her head was injured and she was in a coma. He was neither alive nor dead. She also had delirium at that time, and she almost died, but came back to life. Yanji had difficulty adjusting to the world after waking up, because since waking up she saw figures from time to time. The patient was curious about who Yanji saw and Yanji answered figures that might be human or not. Sometimes even though she saw them, she couldn't tell the difference. She was often confused whether they were human or not. There were different characteristics from them that difficult to explain. And the person that patient saw was a man who was on the verge of life and death. He was a coma patient who was on the verge of death, so Yanji tried whatever she could. Yanji chatted with the coma patient and took care of him. Yanji remembered a nurse who used to take care of her. She was a senior nurse. She always gave Yanji encouragement and now Yanji does the same thing to the patients she takes care of. She plays a song for the patient and asks the patient not to give up. So, if he meets someone who is on the verge of life and death, it means he is also experiencing something similar like Yanji. She doesn't know what will happen, but if he keeps meeting them, so, please be careful from now on now. Hyunju was shocked when a man called her. He asked if Hyunju saw a dog. The man couldn't sleep because of the dog's voice. The dog always barked every time he was about to sleep. Was he the only one who heard it? Hyunju felt something was strange about the man. Then she turned on the flashlight and flashed on the man. She had to observe the man to find out, and sure enough, it turned out that the man was the man who had come to the light shop, who was always cold. Hyunju had to pretend not to notice anything strange, and then Hyunju asked permission to go home because her mother was waiting and the man let her go home. The patients in the hospital experienced changes for the better. Yanji thought it might not only be the determination of the patient, but also the determination of other people. And there were not only patients that Yanji had seen, but also people who were on the verge of life and death. There was a student with a broken leg, who just sat crying in front of Cen Hey's house. Then there was Cen Hey, who couldn't get out of her house, who was trapped in the house and scared by herself. There was a man who was always cold, who always heard the sound of dogs. Then there was a man who took the bus, whose body was probably put into a suitcase by a woman in white. And it turned out that the policeman was also in a coma. That's why when he met Wang, his eyes looked strange. And the nurses took care of the patients in the ICU with enthusiasm, because it's their job. When Hyunju got home, she told her mother what she had just experienced. Hyunju wondered why her mother was lying down without turning on the lights. Was it because Hyunju didn't bring a light bulb when she came home? Hyunju couldn't do anything because she always met strange people who made her afraid to go to the light shop. Then Hyunju apologized to her mother and she promised to buy her a light tomorrow. But her mother just kept quiet and Hyunju felt that her mother's body was very fragrant and it turned out that her mother was the deceased who was previously in the morgue. Her mother had died and there were flowers around her body in the coffin, so Hyunju smelled the fragrance on her mother's body. And it turned out that the woman carrying the suitcase was peeking behind Hyunju's door. A near-death experience is an experience of being on the verge of death. A summary of research results shows that around 4 to 18% of people who are resuscitated from cardiac arrest face a near-death experience. Many of the people who almost died expressed similar testimonies. They claim to see a bright light. They claim to see a dark tunnel. They claim to meet their loved ones again. Kim Hyun-min, the man who was previously put in a suitcase by the woman in white, was seen seated at a train carrying a bouquet of flowers beside him. He sent a message to his lover that he was heading home. However, his lover felt that it was too late and it turned out that his lover was the woman in white, Lee Ji-young. Ji-young looked sad when replying to a message from Hyun-min. It turned out that today was Ji-young's birthday and Hyun-min wanted to meet his lover to propose to her. Because Hyun-min had brought a bouquet of flowers and a ring. Previously Ji-young met Hyun-min's mother and her mother asked Ji-young to break up with Hyun-min. Meanwhile Cen Hey, the woman who was previously locked up in a haunted house, was seen looking around the apartment. And her apartment mate is Park Hae-won. She is the woman in red shoes, whose body can become very tall. Hae-won doesn't seem to like the apartment very much, whilst Cen Hey seems to like it and the broker thinks that their relationship is mother and daughter. After school, Hyunju was picked up by her mother. Her father couldn't pick her up because he had a business trip, therefore her mother picked her up. Because it was raining heavily, her mother brought 2 umbrellas, but Hyunju didn't want to use her own umbrella. She wanted to walk close to her mother. On the way, they chatted about when they would move to the apartment because there was a house reconstruction. Hyunju was sad because she had to move to a new apartment that was not far from the school, so her mother wouldn't pick her up anymore. Hyunju really liked it when her mother picked her up from school and her mother said she would still pick her up even though she had moved, and that made Hyunju happy. Meanwhile, Jiwoong, a student who was previously lost in a dark alley, came home from school with his friends. At school they were basketball athletes at his school, and Jiwoong carrying a basketball on the way home. Oh Sangwon, the man who cried in the elevator with Yanji earlier, is a bus driver. It seems like the bus he is driving is having problems. He thinks the problem is with the brake pads. However, there are still passengers waiting for the last bus. He can't fix it and has to go to the next bus station so it can be fixed there. Because if it is not fixed at the station, then he has to pay the repair costs. He has no choice but to turn on the bus engine and tell the passengers to get on. There is a grandmother who is taking her grandson on the bus, then asks the driver to look after her grandson, and the bus departs. After getting off the train, because he is in a hurry, Hyunmin feels that something is left on the train. It is a bouquet of flowers and a gift for Ji-young. It is too late to take it, and luckily, he still has the ring in his pocket. Then he sends a message to Ji-young that he is still waiting for the bus to come and to immediately follow her home. It is raining heavily, so he tells Ji-young not to wait for him outside. It seems like Ji-young has a shop like a craft, and at this time, she is giving a sign that her shop is temporarily closed. Finally, the bus comes and Hyunmin gets into the bus, while some passengers got off. At the next stop, Jiwoong also got on the bus driven by Sangwon. The driver felt something was wrong and he gave a sign that the bus was not operating. Then Cen Hey and Haiwan walked carrying their own umbrellas. Cen Hey told Haiwan not to follow her. She was upset because Haiwan didn't like the apartment because it had many residents and the neighbors were close. Cen Hey was upset how long they would hide, and Haiwan felt they weren't like a couple. It turned out that the two of them were dating, and Haiwan felt that their relationship would be difficult because people would notice and gossip about them, and they had to keep explaining their relationship and keep making excuses. Haiwan felt that Cen Hey would have a harder time than her, but Cen Hey was angry because Haiwan always hid their relationship. She asked Haiwan not to call her name anymore and not to follow her, because she didn't want to see Haiwan again. The bus stopped and Cen Hey got on the bus by taking off her shoes. Then Haiwan took her shoes and got on the bus. Haiwan sat in the back of Cen Hey. Actually, the driver didn't want to take any more passengers, because he had to go to the bus pool immediately, but Hyunju and her mother ran to catch the bus. Because the driver couldn't bear it, someone stopped the bus and they both got into the bus. Inside the bus, Hyunju saw Cen Hey and Haiwan, who had the same shoes, and there seemed to be something strange about them. Then her mother told her daughter to stop looking at them. It seemed like Hyunju knew they were a couple who were fighting, and they enjoyed the trip on the bus. In the middle of the trip, suddenly one of the tires burst and the driver couldn't control the speed of the bus. Behind there was a truck driver who was shocked, and the collision couldn't be avoided. Hyunmin tried to catch his cell phone and Haiwan hugged Cen Hey. Mrs. Yoo-hee hugged her daughter tightly and the bus plunged into the river. And when Ji-young walked outside and was replying to a message from Hyunmin, she saw the bus plunge into the river. Ji-young immediately called Hyunmin, but there was no answer. Then she called emergency, but because she was mute, she couldn't answer the phone. And she ran and cried towards her lover's place. The victims were taken to the hospital and medical personnel were busy trying to save them. Jiwoong had a fairly serious fracture in his back, and the little boy was not seriously injured. Mrs. Yoo-hee had a cardiac arrest and Hyunju was treated next to her. And Sangwon, the driver, also had a cardiac arrest with a swollen stomach, while Haiwan and Cen Hey were taken to the operating room with their bodies hugging. And Ji-young arrived at the hospital running, but when she entered, she was confused because she was not Hyunmin's family and Hyunmin's family was also against their relationship. In the waiting room, the doctor told Sangwon, the driver's guardian, that Sangwon had died at 7 on September 11, 2018. Hearing that, his wife was very sad and she looked very weak. Jiwon came out of the operating room and his parents took him to the ICU. Hyunju's father came, wearing a mourning suit. Has her mother died? And she saw Hyunju come out of the operating room. Then Cen Hey was also taken out of the operating room and her parents accompanied her. There was a victim who was taken out in a dead state and she was Haiwan. A policeman came and gave Hyunmin's cell phone, who was on the bus. Then Ji-young called him and her mother saw the call. Her mother cruelly sent a message to Ji-young that Hyunmin died because of Ji-young. Ji-young was devastated and cried silently. Even though Hyunmin had not died, he was still alive and they took him to the ICU. Hyunmin's father felt that his wife was too much, because even though Ji-young couldn't hear, she shouldn't have said that. Ji-young must have been devastated, so contacted her and explained the truth. And when her father wanted to send a message to her, Ji-young sent a message that she would follow Hyunmin. Ji-young committed suicide and Hyunmin's family was shocked to find out. Her father sent a message that Hyunmin was still alive and Ji-young saw it with a rope tied around her neck. She tried to untie the rope, but it was too late.
모르겠어요.
After committing suicide and dying, Ji-young's body was taken to the morgue. The doctor and nurse saw the noose around her neck and felt that Ji-young must have been in great pain. They would clean and shroud her. When she passed away, Ji-young would forget all her memories. They held a 3-day funeral, because the funeral tradition has been passed down since ancient times. People wait 3 days before sending off the deceased, just in case they come back to life. And it's not just the bereaved who say goodbye, those who live also need time to say goodbye. Giving 3 days is a final respect for the departed. In other words, the deceased only has 3 days left. When they were dating, Ji-young always waited for Hyunmin on a bus stop bench, and Hyunmin came by bus. After she died, Ji-young still waited in the same place. She sat alone remembering the old days of dating. When they watched movies at the cinema, they also spent time together at Ji-young's house. Because Ji-young is mute, they have a code word "I love you" that they had knocked on a large drum. After dying, Ji-young tried to pronounce the word and she could pronounce Kim Hyunmin, "I miss you too." A bus came and Hyunmin got off the bus, but he didn't remember Ji-young and that made Ji-young sad. And while walking, Hyunmin suddenly fell. There were 2 men who were tasked with cleaning Ji-young's belongings in the house that Ji-young rented. They worked at night because they were worried that the building owner would lose out if news of Ji-young's suicide in the house spread. They felt that the building owner was being excessive considering that Ji-young had just died. They would clean the shop first, then the house, and before starting they would pay their respects first. When starting to clean up Ji-young's belongings, one of the men felt something strange behind the door of her house. At first he tried to ignore it, but he heard more and more strange sounds and then he invited his friend to live there. He felt that Ji-young hadn't left and was still in the house. The next night a similar incident happened again. At that time Ji-young knocked her hand with the code they had used for. Hyunmin seems to remember the knocking sound, but he ignores it and he falls back unconscious and Ji-young approaches him. In the cinema, a woman seems to hear a strange sound like a cutting sound, then she looks back. And there is a suitcase there. When she checks it again, the suitcase is gone. They leave because they are scared. In the cinema Ji-young seems to be sewing something and Hyunmin seems to wake up again. Even though they are like wandering spirits, Hyunmin, who is in a coma, does not remember Ji-young, unlike Ji-young, who remembers him well. And Ji-young is in several places to sew Hyunmin's body so he can wake up again. Hyunmin only remembers Ji-young when Ji-young has become a spirit and does not remember when she was still alive. Now Ji Young only has a little time, because she only has 3 days. When the nurse wants to clean Ji Young's body, the door cannot be opened. The refrigerator works, but the door cannot be opened, and the doctor feels that Ji Young have a lot of hatred, so they can only wait. Meanwhile, Sang-sik, who was still in the light shop, because the rain had not stopped. Even though Wang was wearing sunglasses, Sang-sik knew that Wang was looking at him. He felt that Wang was used to watching people, and that was because her job was handling customers. That was not much different from Sang-sik's job. He also knew if there was something different from someone's attitude. He could tell a little about people by looking at them, but he didn't know how old Wang was, and suddenly, Wang said that he used to have a daughter. Then Sang-sik decided to look for the man he was looking for because the rain had stopped. Sang-sik walked here and there and then, at home, and his wife was still at home and admitted that even though she was 4 months pregnant, her stomach was not big. Sang-sik then walked and ran to the street again, and when he returned home, his wife was no longer at home. He then ran again to the street until his legs were weak and he was confused because it was like walking in the same place over and over again. Then when he sat down, suddenly his eyes were strange again. When Yanji passed by her apartment complex, suddenly there was a dog barking. She told the dog to be quiet because there was a strange man who looking for him. But the dog kept barking and Yanji told him to go away. Finally the dog went away. Yanji entered the elevator and suddenly there was a man who entered the elevator. Yanji was a bit scared because there was blood on his clothes, and it turned out that he is Hyunmin. Then she ran to her apartment, and because she was nervous, Yanji pressed the wrong door password. Hyunmin is curious and asks if Yanji has ever seen him, and Yanji answered no. Hyunmin doesn't remember since when he lived in that apartment, and suddenly Hyunmin fell and Yanji was shocked because his body bent. Then Ji Young came and asked Yanji to leave him because he was her man, and Yanji entered her apartment. Yanji was curious and tried to peek at them, but her mother pulled her and told her to be quiet. It turned out that Ji Young peeked at the door and knew that the mother and Yanji remembered each other, but why was Ji Young different? Yanji asked her mother to let her go. She was disappointed because lately her mother was strange. Her mother only asked Yanji to buy a light bulb for her, even though she couldn't go to the light shop anymore because she was afraid. She met a lot of strange people lately, but her mother didn't listen to her and made her frustrated. Yanji really hated her situation because she didn't have friends. They ignored her and thought she didn't exist. She felt something was wrong with her and she didn't want to buy a light bulb anymore and didn't want to leave the house. Yanji entered the hospital parking lot and she saw a grandmother sitting with a young man. It seemed like she was the spirit who had just died, and then Yanji greeted her. The grandmother was shocked because Yanji could see her and thought Yanji was dead. Yanji was just a human who was almost dead, and then she asked the grandmother what she was doing there. It turned out that she sat there because she didn't want to hear people crying because of her. Then Yanji asked who the young man sitting next to her was. It turned out that he was her beloved grandson. The grandmother was sad because she would forget him. If she went there, she would forget everything about this place, and today was her last day. But she couldn't stop worrying about her grandson. Then Yanji took out her lunch and asked the grandmother to tell her about her grandson. While in the ICU, her friend asked Yanji for earwax because she seemed to hear something. Then Yanji gave her earwax and said maybe her friend's ears were just sensitive. It turned out that the strange sound was from Ji Young's crying. She accompanied Hyunmin, who was still in a coma, in the ICU. Then Yanji approached and explained that they had tried their best and now it depended on the patient's determination. But she didn't know where the determination came from. Maybe it wasn't just her own determination. It's still a mystery why Hyunmin can still survive. The doctor finds it difficult to explain. This patient is in a coma, so where does the determination come from? While Cen Hey was still in the rented house, then she saw the patient's clothes there. She then entered the room with the light bulb and suddenly she remembered Wang. She remembered when they were fighting in the rain, and she also remembered the accident. That her hands couldn't be released because the corpse was stiff after death. The person behind her saved the one in front. The memory made Cen Hey cry because she regretted just remembering it. Before the accident, she said hurtful words to Wang and now she was looking for Wang. Even though Wang's spirit was beside her and was hugging her. When Yanji wanted to go home, she saw a boy in the waiting room. He was looking for someone in the ICU. Yanji asked who he was, because the boy shouldn't be there except for the patient's family. The boy wanted to return the ball he was holding. He hung the ball around his neck on the day of the bus accident. It seems like Yanji knows who he is and Yanji will return the ball to him. The boy gave the ball to Yanji.
어시스트.
Ji-young, Sungwon and Sung-sik wandered around the street that often they passed. Sung-sik felt strange because suddenly his lighter could light up, even though it never wanted to light up before. He remembered a truck that seemed to hit him, and he saw his shadow. There was a bump on his head. Sung-sik then went into a light shop and asked Wang for coffee. And Wang gave it. Sung-sik felt that the coffee was not hot and he didn't feel anything. He wandered around there and realized that his body was strange. Wang felt that many people came to his shop and didn't realize it. And Sung-sik wanted to know what this shop was that had a very long night. Wang also asked the same thing, and when he opened his glasses, and it turned out that his eyes were like a cat's. When Sung-sik asked what place this shop actually is, Wang took off his glasses and his eyes were like cat's eyes. Sung-sik looked and his eyes turned white. Actually, Wang also asked the same thing.
나도 같은 질문을 했었죠.
There used to be a building that collapsed and Wang was trapped in the building with his daughter. His daughter was hit by a large rock and Wang tried to get her out. With all his might, Wang pushed the rock, but he failed because the rock was too heavy. Wang tried again and failed again. Then his daughter took candy and gave it to her father and told him to wake up. Somehow, Wang's body was next to his daughter and they were both hit by a large rock. Then his daughter ate candy and her father promised he would return with help before the candy ran out. Her father left her alone with the ruins of the building. Wang walked down a dark alley and called out to someone, but there was no one there, until he saw a shop that was lit up. He entered the shop and there was a woman wearing a hanbok and sunglasses. He asked the woman to help his daughter, but the woman said it was too late. The woman told Wang to leave because she couldn't do anything about it. Wang was very frustrated because that was the only place that he came, but the woman still said she couldn't because his daughter had to come of her own free will. Wang was very angry because his daughter couldn't move and he planned to destroy the place. When Wang took a lamp and wanted to destroy it, the woman immediately took off her glasses and her eyes were like cat's eyes. All the lights went out and Wang couldn't move. His eyes turned all white. Then the woman returned the lamp. When she put her glasses back on, the lights came back on and Wang fell. The woman said that his daughter's light bulb was there. Hearing that, Wang realized that the shop was not an ordinary shop. It turned out that Wang's body was still in the ruins of the building with his daughter and his daughter was scared because her father didn't move. Wang realized that he was dead and he worried about his daughter because she was trapped alone and could only cry. Wang was in the lamp shop because he couldn't accept the reality. Then he asked for his daughter's light bulb. But the woman couldn't give it to him because his daughter had to come of her own free will. Wang would do anything for his daughter and the woman made sure again whether Wang would do it, even if it took a long time. And they made a deal.
거래를 하죠.
Back to the present, Sung-sik still doesn't understand why he's there after the accident. He thought he was a ghost, but Wang said that he's still alive. Before Sung-sik had seen a ghost and he was confused if he wasn't a ghost, Why did he look like a weirdo? Wang explained that in the world, when people die, they walk around and look weird. That's why they're called ghosts. But there, when people are alive, they walk around and look like ghosts. Those who couldn't live until the end, because of a tragic accident, continue their lives here. There are those who can't accept their death and wander there. Sang-sik felt confused, because Wang Yang was talking in circles. He was just curious about what this place was, a place where there were so many weird people walking around. Wang Yang answered that the place was the afterlife.
사후세계입니다.
The man who was always cold was disturbed by the sound of a dog again. He was running out of patience and would find the dog no matter what. He saw the dog and chased it, but the man had difficulty catching the dog because the dog running very fast. Meanwhile in the ICU room, a new nurse arrived who would help them with their duties. She was Song Byung. That was her first job, so she will need a lot of help from other nurses. But her friends seem less enthusiastic, maybe because she is new to the job, so she needs a lot of practice. The senior nurse told Yanji to be her mentor and teach her. Then Yanji invited her to learn what needs to be prepared. The most important thing is to identify the patient, presentation, history and status of the patient's care. And the reason they are in the ICU, she must know all that. Recently there was a major accident and their hospital was the closest to the accident. So, there were many critical patients that were even very difficult for them to distinguish, and Yanji will introduce those patients to Byung. On the day of the accident, he was the first patient to arrive, but he was not a traffic accident patient. There was another accident on the same day. The patient was named Kong Byung-jin. He was a man who was always cold. He got lost in the mountains and stumbled. Actually, it was because of hypothermia. He lost consciousness due to hypothermia on a rainy day, and the rescue team was looking for him. He was lucky because he was warmed up a rescue dog. His vital signs are maintained. Rescue dogs are trained to stay by his side and keep barking when someone needs help, and the dog stayed by his side even in the cold rain. It turned out that the dog was injured because it was stabbed by wood, and Byung-jin finally remembered that moment. He regretted and apologized to the dog. When he arrived at the hospital, he was already unconscious and his rescue dog did not survive. Hyeonju's father attended the funeral of his wife, Hyeonju's mother. He then called the ICU to ask about his daughter. The senior nurse answered the phone and reported that Hyeonju had not woken up. She would call her father if Hyeonju had improved. Hyeonju's wounds were not visible, but she lost consciousness due to head trauma, subdural hemorrhage, cerebrovascular in the inner dura mater burst, due to severe external shock. There were no visible wounds from the outside, but traumatic subdural hemorrhage has a very high mortality rate. She was with her mother at the time of the accident. Her mother tried her best to protect her daughter, but it was not enough to prevent the shock from falling, and because of the accident, her mother died. When she wakes up, it will be a sad dream. Hyeonju cries in her room because she is angry with her mother, and her mother knocks on her door, but Hyeonju does not open the door. She takes the pendant necklace from Hyeonju's grandfather and then leaves the house. Then there are patients who hug each other during the accident. They are Wang and Cen Hey. They were separated during surgery, but Cen Hey has not woken up while the woman who hugged her was not safe. In another world, Wang hugs Cen Hey and she tells Cen Hey to wake up. Wang thinks the house they are currently living in is too dark, so she tells Cen Hey to buy a light bulb. But Cen Hey can't get out of the house because she always enters the wrong door password. But Wang thinks the door lock should be on the outside. The door is open, so Cen Hey can get out if she wants. When leaving the house, there is a light shop at the end of the alley. Go and look for a light bulb. Hearing Wang's words, for some reason Cen Hey sheds tears. Then there is Ji-woong, a bus accident patient who likes basketball. Yanji puts basketball under Ji-woong's bed. She gave a perfect pass. In a dark alley, someone saw a basketball rolling and followed it. The basketball reached where Ji-woong was and someone approached him. It turned out that he had been looking for Ji-woong for quite a long time and was able to find him because he followed the basketball. Ji-woong was confused about who the man in front of him, and someone would tell him while walking because he would get Ji-woong out of there. But according to Ji-woong, the alley had no end. Then someone told Ji-woong to get on his back because he would get Ji-woong out of the alley. Someone carried Ji-woong on his back and walked down the alley. He felt that Ji-woong must be scared because he was in a dark alley alone, but actually it wasn't just Ji-woong who was trapped in the alley. The place where they met earlier, there is a house and there was a woman near the window who couldn't get out of the house. After knowing that he was in the afterlife, Sang-sik thought that people who didn't survive the accident would live in nature. And because he is not dead, he looks like that there. Because he is a detective, that makes him distrustful and always doubtful, but Wang Yang thinks Sang-sik is the proof. Then Wang Yang asks what is his child's name, and Sang-sik replied that his wife had a miscarriage. Then Wang Yang mentioned the names of the fetuses in Hyunju's class locker. Children in that world often have those names, and Sang-sik believed what Wang Yang said. Sang-sik was curious why Wang Yang didn't tell him from the start. That's because if Sang-sik realized everything, then he would remember that place. Those who want to return must go without memories of that place. If someone returns with memories of this place, then the two worlds will mix. And they can't distinguish time and space. Those who want to return can't build bonds there. And Wang Yang who protects that borderline. And the man riding the scooter is the man who tried to lead Sang-sik to the light shop. Wang Yang told Sang-sik to go and check because Sang-sik had found his light. Then Sang-sik lit his match. Something happened in the ICU. Yanji saw the movement and approached Sang-sik. Yanji checked his pupils and finally, Sang-sik opened his eyes for the first time after being in a coma. Seeing the nurses, Sang-sik shed tears. Meanwhile, the rescue dog led Byung-jin to the lamp shop. Then Byung-jin and his dog entered the shop and the dog showed him the light bulb and he held the light bulb. Finally, Sang-won and Jin-woong arrived near the light shop and Sang-won told Jin-woong to go into the shop and find the light. But Jin-woong didn't think to go in there, but Sang-won persuaded him to go in there. Because that was the only way to get out of the alley, Sang-won also apologized to Jin-woong. And Jin-woong went into the light shop and met Wang Yang. It turned out that Wang Yang observed Jin-woong, who often passed in front of his shop. Then he asked what he could help with, and Jin-woong said he was looking for light. Jin-woong saw the lights there and he saw a different bulb by itself. Then he touched it and the bulb shone very bright. 5 years ago, Yanji woke up after being in a coma for 1 month. Yanji felt like it was more than a month because she felt the time flow was different in her dream world. She continued to feel confused about where she was and what day it was. Nurse Kwan explained that it was delirium. ICU patients often experience this after major surgery, and Yanji still has to be treated even after leaving the hospital. Yanji just realized how beautiful the lights were, and after that she wanted to become a nurse like the nurse who took care of her. There was an incident in the ICU room and the nurses immediately rushed. It turned out that the man that Yanji had previously seen walking in the ICU room had regained consciousness. A man driving a car suddenly stopped on a bridge. He seemed to see something, but after checking he didn't see anything. It turned out that there was Ji-young who was sewing Hyun-min's body, and then Hyun-min woke up, but Ji-young was gone by his side. Ji-young is frustrated because she doesn't have much time, but Hyun-min still doesn't remember her. The bus driver was shocked when he saw Ji-young in front of him, and he stepped on the brakes and stopped suddenly. But he couldn't see Ji-young, and Ji-young got on the bus. She approached Hyun-min and asked if he still didn't remember her. She was very disappointed because Hyun-min still didn't remember her. Ji-young cried because she felt that Hyun-min didn't love her. Hyun-min was still confused, and Ji-young explained that the people there couldn't see them, only Hyun-min could see Jiyoung. Then Jiyoung took off his clothes and Hyunmin was shocked to see his stomach with stitches. Inside the house, Hyunmin felt sorry for not remembering Jiyoung. He asked what they should do now. Jiyoung said that she had a request and Hyunmin would do whatever Jiyoung asked. It turned out that Jiyoung told him to go to the light shop, look for a light bulb that shone. When Hyunmin approached it, he had to find it as if by his own will. Although Hyunmin was confused, Jiyoung insisted that Hyunmin could find the light.
어떻게든 너의 빛을 찾아.
Meanwhile, someone tried to climb the fence of the house where Wang and Cen Hey lived. Then Wang opened the window and someone apologized to her. He knew that at that time his bricks were problematic, but there were people waiting and he postponed checking it at the company to save money. Wang felt it was all someone's fault, but she was still glad he came to apologize. Accidents are not something that humans can avoid, they just have bad luck. But don't blame him for the misfortune, because it happened to all of them. Someone didn't have much time. He looked for those who were still alive and took them to the light shop. Both Sungwon and Wang tried to send them back. Then Wang told Sungwon to go to Somang's apartment. There was Hyunju who lived in the apartment and she's still alive. Hyunju's mother walked alone and Sungwon approached her. He apologized to Hyunju's mother. Seeing Hyunju's mother, who had difficulty speaking, made Sungwon cry. He was very sorry to know that Hyunju's mother had died. Her mother only showed him where her daughter was and she left Sungwon. Hyunju's mother turned out to have gone to the light shop and Wang was confused because she couldn't talk. Wang realized that she had died, then she saw Hyunju's necklace pendant. Wang couldn't help her except Hyunju came to the shop by herself, but her mother couldn't take her there. Her mother was a bit pushy and begged Wang for just one more time, because he felt pressured. Then Wang took off his glasses and when he saw Hyunju's mother's eyes, she suddenly went quiet. Hyunju's mother remembered something. She cried and gave Wang candy. She tried to remind Wang something and Wang realized that she was her daughter who he had left alone. Wang cried and hugged his daughter. It was really touching. They met again in the afterlife after his daughter died. It turned out that Wang had brought a light bulb to his daughter. It was an agreement he made with the woman wearing a hanbok that made Wang got the light shop now. He sacrificed himself so that his daughter could live. Hyunju came out of her apartment and entered the elevator. There was a woman there, but the woman didn't seem to be able to see Hyunju. Then, Hyunju saw someone who was already weak. Someone said that he met her mother on the street. Hyunju was a bit surprised because someone knew that her mother couldn't talk. Someone asked if Hyunju remembers him because they met before. Hyunju probably doesn't remember him to knows what happened to her right now. Someone explains that the woman who just passed by couldn't see them. This is confusing for Hyunju, but once she realizes it, Hyunju will know. Hyunju also remembers that when she was in class, no one cared about her. It was because no one could see her. Suddenly she had a nosebleed and was confused what actually happened, and someone could only apologize. Someone felt he couldn't take her to the light shop. He could only tell her a message from her mother. That her mother tried hard to send Hyunju back. Her mother came home with a light bulb for Hyunju. But Hyunju didn't want to accept it, even though her mother forced her daughter to touch the bulb. Hyunju wanted to stay there with her mother. She cried and begged her mother to let her stay. Her mother wanted to say something, but she couldn't speak and her daughter kept crying and didn't want to leave there. Then her mother said that her father was waiting for her and she tried to get Hyunju to come back because her father was alone. And her mother forced Hyunju to hold the bulb and there was a light that shining from the apartment. Finally, Cen Hey wants to go to the light shop and although reluctant, Wang lets her go. They both actually find it hard to part, but both hold back their sadness. Cen Hey stops in the middle of the road and cries and Wang cries alone in the house. Finally, Cen Hey arrives and enters the light shop. She looks at the lights in the shop and finds a bulb that is shining, then she touches the bulb. At the hospital, Cen Hey almost opens her eyes, but somehow, she suddenly returns home and surprises Wang. It turned out she dies in the ICU. Before died, Cen Hey removes the bulb and asks Wang what happens if the bulb breaks. Can she live there? And Wang answers that people can live anywhere. So Cen Hey prefers to live with Wang, and she drops the bulb until it breaks. Jiang escorts Hyunmin to the front of the light shop. She tells Hyunmin to remember what she said before. Jiang promises to come to him, and Hyunmin hugs Jiang. Hyunmin must find his light no matter what, and then he left Jiang and entered the light shop. As usual, Wang asked what he could help him with, and Hyunmin replied that he came because he needed something. He looked for a bulb that shone differently, but he seemed to be in a hurry and almost held the wrong lamp. Wang knew that it wasn't his will, and then he found a different bulb. The light shone from inside the shop, and Jiang ran calling his name. In the shop, Hyunmin was no longer there, and Jiang cried, whether because she was sad or happy because Hyunmin had returned. 3 months later, Jiwoong had fully recovered and was about to leave the hospital. From time to time, he wandered in his dreams, and when he woke up, he was covered in sweat, but strangely his heart felt warm. Yanji told Jiwoong not to meet again, hearing that Jiwoong felt like he had heard those words before. And Yanji felt that the man was rude, but still kind. Did that mean Yanji still remembered when she had delirium, when she was in a coma? It turns out that previously, she gave a message to the ghosts she met and also the coma patients to find a light. It was actually a right bait for the patients to wake up and return. In the afterlife, someone remains a bus driver who carries passengers. Meanwhile, Cen Hey becomes a writer and lives at home with Wang. They are happy there. Hyunju finally returns to the world, and her father always accompanies her. He always worries about his daughter's condition, who doesn't seem to have fully recovered. She tells her father not to worry about her. She wants to meet her friends, so she goes to school. While in the classroom, Hyunju feels unwell and asks her teacher's permission to rest in the nurse's room. But she doesn't go into the nurse's room. She goes out to the schoolyard and washes her hands, and she feels her hands are very cold. It seems like she still feels in the afterlife, and she still remembers everything, and also her mother. She even refuses to have her delirium treatment so that she can still remember her mother. Hyunju's mother meets Wang and calls him father. It turns out that she can speak normally, and now they are also taking care of the rescue dog. It seems like they are happy to live in the afterlife. Hyunju was surprised when behind her was a female student she had met in the other world. The girl thanked Hyunju for greeting her, and they had met several times. Previously, the girl had never had a friend, but after Hyunju left, she was alone again, so she followed Hyunju. Does Hyunju want to be friends with her because she has a secret?
나도 비밀이 있거든.
Sang-sik being a detective, he visits the shop belongs to the scooter man, Kim Sang-hoon. It turns out that Sang-hoon has died, and when he died, Sang-sik was still in a coma in the ICU, so now he is a ghost. Sang-sik thanks Sang-hoon because Sang-hoon saved him earlier. He is the one who lured Sang-sik into entering the light shop and found the light. Sang-hoon's job there is to send those who shouldn't be here and to that place. Sang-hoon feels that Sang-sik's eyes are very special and sharp. He can see what others don't see. Then he gives his glasses to Sang-sik and for him to continue the pending cases. And Sang-sik agrees and wears the glasses. Meanwhile, Hyunmin is still experiencing delirium, and he still has to check his health with the doctor. He feels strange because he doesn't remember his deceased girlfriend, Jiyoung. He feels very confused and like he's going crazy, but the doctor feels that it's because of delirium and will get better soon. Then the doctor suggests Hyunmin to clear his mind of disturbing thoughts and throw away the things that disturb him. While on the bridge where he had the bus accident, he rereads Jiyoung's message before. And because he felt confused, he threw away the cell phone. When Hyunmin wanted to enter his apartment, he forgot his password and the lights went out because Hyunmin just kept quiet. Then, he waved his hand so that the lights would come back on, but he remembered when he waved to Jiyoung before. And suddenly the lights came on.